Welcome back. Here we are. We have had some audio before. I think we have it fixed. Cam, if you're listening right now, and Keys, I've just turned him off, so you might want to have a play around with that. We're going to talk about a very serious subject today. By the way, apologies for yesterday. We weren't here, but we are here today, and we have a 2-hour show. Got this one, and then one after from our time, 6 till 7. So stay around, hang around, and probably enjoy the program. Now, has Trump's strike of choice on Iran already set in train calamitous geopolitical and economic impacts? Probably. Or is Trump a master magician who can take down the London establishment, the mad mullahs, and his most vociferous enemies at home to remove once and for all the existential threat that was and is Iran? If this war can really be over in 4 weeks, as Trump has suggested, we must be watching some elaborate and deadly 4D chess game, which he's going to win this beautiful, big, beautiful game, or maybe not. Is it much more likely we will see a protracted war and Iran becoming an even more unstable state? Now consider Plan B from the CIA. What could possibly go wrong? That would see ground operations of national separatist movements such as the Kurds engineering domestic uprisings, a civil war, and the involvement, we hope not, of Turkey, Iraq, and other surrounding countries. That would most definitely be on the cards. What could force an end to hostilities? It's not Congress. And who could broker this if Trump cannot be trusted? Imagine the loss of face, but there is so much more at stake. And do any of the protagonists, not our guest, but those cheering on this conflict, really care about the fate of Iranian civilians? Our guests are Oliver Boyd Barrett, Emeritus Professor at Bowling Green State University, Professor Kees Vanderpil, political economist and author, retired Major Fred Galvin, author of A Few Good Men. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. We are going to, you probably need to turn on your microphone, Kees. We had to mute you, so hopefully Cam's fixed up. We've had a lot of feedback coming from your mic, which is, we're trying to do a workaround on that. But while we're trying to fix it up, Oliver, thank you for joining us. What time is it, by the way, where you are?
It is 12 minutes past 11 on March the 4th.
Almost March the 5th. But you're a night owl, and if you're not, well, bad luck. And also, Fred, thank you for joining us again. I know you're in Honolulu, and I can tell by the tan and the cocktail you're hiding from us. Maybe not. But anyway, shush. Okay. Oliver, what's your views so far of and I would probably call it chaos, because it is. The rest of the world now is starting to feel the pinch. What's your views on the attack on Iran by the US and also Israel, and then the ensuing chaos that has followed?
Well, you won't be surprised to hear, Mike, that I'm utterly opposed to this war. I do believe it is a war of choice by the United States and by Israel. We can explore in this program, I'm sure, the many diverse reasons that have been given us for this war. The least credible, in my view, of all of the pretexts cited is that Iran remotely constitutes a nuclear threat to anybody. But right now, and increasingly over the past 2 to 3 days, I have been feeling extremely depressed by what has happened, triggered particularly by the tragedy at Miban in the first day of the war, where the latest figures suggest 160 schoolgirls were slaughtered. We don't know whether it was an Israeli or a US missile. I suspect it was an Israeli missile because this is the kind of thing, as we know from Gaza, that Israelis do. And that was followed up very shortly thereafter by a strike on a recreational facility, which also killed, I don't remember how many, but I think it was a score or so of teenage young women. And I don't say this in jest, but I can't help but associate the Epsteinized Trump administration and the narratives of the abuse, sexual abuse of both young women and young men. And now putting that together in my mind, this unholy, sacrilegious association with the murder.
We
As
do
I
have
answer the
a slight glitch. Professor Vanderpeel, can you just tell me your views? What do you think? I think you're in Amsterdam. What's the view from Europe at the moment on the conflict with Iran and Israel and the US?
Well, the view from Europe is saddening because, with the honourable exception of Spain and possibly Croatia, there have been no government protests whatsoever against what I also consider a war that breaks all rules of warfare. I just saw some images of a German Nazi submarine saving the crew of a British ship that they torpedoed during World War II. The United States Navy has torpedoed an Iranian naval vessel near Sri Lanka in international waters. And after killing or after downing the ship, they turned around and left. And I think that sums up the ethical standards that we're dealing with here. It's a frightening situation because there are basically no limits to what we can expect. And of course, after Gaza, well, basically after the whole era of existence of Israel, we already knew that there were no limits to the malice and the evil that they can produce. And now, with all the tabs that they have on Trump and his team, I'm very fearful of what may happen. Little wonder that Zelensky of Ukraine has offered to send volunteers to help with the fight against Iran. That's how the different conflicts are now fitting into each other and aggravating each other.
I have to ask retired Major Fred Gelvin. You've seen hundreds of sorties or missions in the Middle East. You're a very brave soldier. From a military point of view, or from your point of view, what's your views on the conflict at the moment? Now, I recall you telling me a while back when we had you on before that politicians think they can control the direction of a war. And when I see Donald Trump and other politicians saying it will be finished within a particular time frame, I always think about what you and others have said, that you can't control the direction of a war. So, taking that into account, and I could be wrong here, but I think I am a good student. Your views, is it any different to what we think at the moment? That perhaps we talk about the Iranian regime, or the media talk about it being a terrible regime. But take that aside. What about military-wise, tactical-wise? Was it a good idea to go in, first of all, And should we have had so many politicians involved, because we have this time frame, and it could very well go on for months and months. And you know the area, you know the Middle East very well. What's your thoughts?
Uh, there's a lot there, and I'll start with, as you mentioned, leaders talk about they can or cannot control war, and I believe that they can control timelines, as we saw President Biden do in the last. And that was one of the good things that I saw President Biden do, is order a withdrawal or go along with what President Trump had said, we will withdraw. But how that happened is an entirely different story, which we'll save that for later. But war is just like any other fight. It's not a noun; it's a verb. You cannot easily control it, and those that think they can, the enemy has a vote. One thing, I'll say two other things is, unlike a lot of the listeners, I was a special operations officer, and during the 27 years I served in the Marine Corps, the only non-operational position that I had was as an instructor at the Marine Corps' version of the Navy's Top Gun, or the Air Force's Red Flag, and I was the one that taught and then controlled aviation fires. I was the guy on the ground controlling these airstrikes. So these, I know how these are done, both with manned and unmanned aircraft, and the rules of engagement that go into that. I know how people were trained to do these precision airstrikes with precision guided munitions. But furthermore, what I think is more important is, just like I wrote in the book, A Few Bad Men, I was falsely accused of killing Afghan villagers, and I was proven as exonerated from that. And it took 12 years for that to be fully cleared, and for the Department of the Navy to issue a very explicit 12-page letter, which it said by name certain high-ranking officers. What they did was immoral. What they did was unjust. So I believe of the panel, I'm the only one who's actually been boots on the ground, been falsely accused of war crimes, and I've seen what people have accused us of, and how the propaganda can just blow out of control, reinforced by riots, protests, instant stringers, these so-called journalists that had these prepared stories. And one thing to reinforce what I'm saying, Mike, is if any of us were to die of a bomb right now, the likelihood of that getting out on this station or any other international media market in 20 minutes, I would say, is almost impossible. But that's what happened to us. 20 minutes later, this was on the BBC. That's a fact. And then it was a nonstop battle. Then it was in the New York Times and Washington Post. But all I'm saying is, just like the late Congressman Walter B. Jones had mentioned and wrote in a letter, which I was recently reviewing, he was the first and the one that fought for us for 12 years to get us fully exonerated. But, that our senior leaders in the military were duped by these people. So if there's any listeners thinking that, oh my gosh, these were innocent kids, well, I've got another story for you. Read the book A Few Bad Men. I'm not trying to pimp my book, but I am trying to say that what you see is not always what you get. There's three sides to every coin: top, a bottom, and the side. So you cannot rush to judgment and get a sensationalized answer that fits your narrative and expect it to be the truth, or be so prideful that afterwards you cannot turn around. And that's what the United States Marine Corps did for 12 years. There's still no military officer in uniform has set the record straight. Congressman Jones led a bicameral, bipartisan House resolution to have the Marine Corps say that on the 4th of March 2007, the Marines in our task force did no wrong, and the Marine Corps wouldn't do it. It took two civilian lawyers in the Department of the Navy to make that full exoneration. But that's what I mean is, it's easy for people to get duped, and pride keeps them dug into that position that, hey, just like the Vatican, once the smoke goes up, that's the answer, and there is no going back. So be patient before you make a judgment. Look at all of the facts. But I do remember as a young 17-year-old lad in recruit training for the United States Marine Corps, I remember the drill instructor saying, if the Iranians take another shot at one of our Navy ships, you guys, us recruits going through the training, are going to be fighting. Now that has never happened. The Marines have never been sent in, other than um, prior to that. I watched as a young child in 1979, where a group of Iranian students stormed our embassy, our U.S. embassy in Tehran, and took 52 of those Americans and held them hostage for 444 days. But to think that there is nothing to provoke, that this is an unjust war, as Hakeem Jeffrey says, I dare to say, when you look at the American politicians, and then you look at those many countries that are sided sympathetic to Iran, such as Russia and China, is is that your frame of mind? I hope it's not. I don't think most people believe that Russia and China or Iran have the best interests, and that America is just willy nilly dropping bombs, killing civilians. I have news for you. They said we killed women and children. And listen to me very clearly. On the 4th of March, which is the 4th of March right now, in 2007, I was there on the patrol, and there was only military-aged men at 9 o'clock in the morning. I saw it with my own eyes. We didn't open fire on anyone that didn't have a weapon that was shooting at us. But what the president of Afghanistan at that time, Hamid Karzai, condemned in the riots that were incited. So there are other sides to this story, and it's absurd for somebody in a climate controlled environment on the other side of the planet to think that they have the answers. That's what fools would dream of, and that's what fools did in our case. These generals from their command centers in Tampa were in a rush for accountability. They kicked us out. These are the same generals that believed in winning hearts and minds. They resurrected a failed strategy from Vietnam of counterinsurgency, and thought they were going to win hearts and minds in Afghanistan, in a tribal area that people believe in Sharia law. But I will say this: if any of you feel so strongly, uh, by all means, you could send your bride to a bed and breakfast in Bagram or in Tehran or any of these places, and get some eyes on before you make some strong comments that school children were killed without any evidence. That's what I know the United States drew upon from Britain, is that we were founded on a society based upon laws, and that people are presumed innocent, and that was taken away from us. We were presumed guilty, and I had to fight for 12 years to have that full exoneration. That led to some severe professional destruction that was very harmful for those men that fought. I mean, what happened to us was a plain garden variety gun battle. We were blown up and shot at on both sides of the road. And when we responded, and there was only fighting age men there, everybody said, "Oh, there were women and children and elderly," and but they didn't have a picture. They didn't have any blood. It was just sensationalized. So I'm seeing the same thing play out right now, Mike.
And I think what I know of, some of the things that have happened, I've got to be careful what I say here. The information operations are a very important part of any conflict. We see that from all sides. They have this, so therefore they provide information that they want you to follow. And I'll come back to you in a second, Fred, on that. But I want to ask Oliver, and again, it's very hard, but the lack of transparency, looking at the history of the parties involved, and you said you are right. There is three sides to every coin. So we have three sides here, and both sides at times have not acted in many people's opinion, properly, honourably. They haven't done that. And truthfully, they haven't done that. So no one is immune to that, but we do understand that an information operation, an information that is leaked out or released, is meant to tell a story. Going to ask you, Oliver, what's your views?
Well, one of the common themes that I talk about in my own works is how perspectives are very much impacted by when people think the narrative starts. So, for example, in this case of Iran, we could say that the narrative starts with the Islamic Revolution in 1979. Or we might say, and there are lots of possibilities here, but if I was forced to choose a starting point, at least a working starting point, it would be the overthrow of Mossadegh, that is Prime Minister Mohammed Mossadegh, in 1953 by an operation which is very, very well documented. There is no disputing of it whatsoever, of a collaboration between British and American intelligence, that is to say, of course, MI6 and CIA, whose purpose was to prevent Mossadegh from developing support for his policy of requiring that British Petroleum, the British-owned petroleum company that operated then in Iran, requiring it to pay a larger percentage. It wasn't a huge percentage, and I'm not remembering the exact figures right now, but it was from a nearly almost from zero to some kind of modest percentage of the profits earned by the company that would return to the Iranian people. That was too much for the British, and they found a willing collaborator in the CIA for a very, very systematic, very carefully thought through plan to overthrow this very popular and democratically elected leader. So if you start from that perspective, and of course I acknowledge right away that it's not the only perspective. We could go further back in time and look at many of the various ways in which over the previous 100 years, both Britain and Russia, Britain, as far as I recall, in southern Iran and Russia in northern Iran, have pretty much expropriated Iranian wealth for their own benefit, of course. But if you start from 1953, you get the sense of here is a grossly unfair and bullying Western intervention, and the imposition by the British and the Americans of the returning of the Pahlavi dynasty back to the Iranian throne, as it were, and he became notorious in many ways. He was notorious for eating up as much weaponry from the United States as he could possibly persuade them to hand over. They were quite willing to hand it over to him because Iran eventually was the kind of U.S. policeman for the Middle East that later on Israel became, and Israel has always been very worried that Iran might return to performing this kind of role for the United States that it once did. But of course, that story came to an end largely because of the fierceness and cruelty and ferociousness of the Shah's secret police, and hence the enormous support for the first sort of Ayatollah back in '79, which turned out, as we know, turned out to be a very strong Islamic revolution, although it didn't have to be. When it started, and before he moved from Paris back to Iran, the supreme leader was quite open to political ideas from the center and from the left. But the West prefers to deal with extreme religious figures than it does to deal with centrist and particularly leftist movements. I think for that reason, ultimately, the right, so to speak, in Iran prevailed. I think I better stop there, Mike. I didn't mean to go on for so long.
No, that's fine. It's we will go over a bit over time here because I think it's an important conversation. So please feel free to enunciate and prosecute your point.
Thank you.
I just want to go to Professor Vanderpeel. Economics is one of your fortes. Take away the damage at the moment that's being done to Iran and surrounding nations such as the United Arab Emirates and places like that. What about the long-term effect when it comes down to economics? Because we know that the push for EVs is still way too small, and so therefore we still need petroleum. And we need petroleum for all sorts of things besides making a vehicle go from A to B at a particular pace. So to have trade stopped and the fear of being sunk by an enemy or a regime wanting to stop ships sail through the Straits of Hormuz, for example, how does this augur for the global community when it gets down to the brass tacks, and that is economics? How is it looking? Because in Australia we're supposed to have 90 days of fuel. We have I think seven days. So it's not very good. And I mean, I haven't got an EV, and I haven't got any wind power on the top of it. So I expect I'll be walking if they don't fix this quickly. What about the rest of the world? Do you see because it's not travelling all that well at the moment. Do you see there's going to be a fairly major hiccup in the advancement of our standards of living and so forth?
Yeah. Well, I don't tell you any secrets when I say it's not looking good, but we have to break that down. First of all, we have to see that Iran warned that in the case of attack, they would do the things that they're doing now. And the first group of states that is going to collapse is really the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, etc. Because they are entirely dependent, even for their food, on the Strait of Hormuz. Of course, there will be no oil coming out and so on and so forth. But let's not forget that we're not dealing with a sort of economy that if the Strait of Hormuz is open, everything is fine. We're looking at an economic, social system which is in deep decline. The financialization of capitalism has made it vulnerable to any sort of shock that happens. And that shock we are seeing now, and you can talk about the illegality of a war of aggression on Iran, which didn't do anything, which hasn't attacked any state outside its own borders since the ancient conflict with the Greeks. So there's the illegality, but there's also the absurdity of starting a war which American war games have shown will always be lost by the United States. And it will also be lost by Israel, which in my view, after long reflection, is a state that should never have existed. And I think that the outcome of the current war, apart from the complete destruction of Iran, which is in full swing now, Major Galvin said that media are, distorting our view of things, and that's of course always the case. But I just heard Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, and he bragged about destroying and raining death and destruction on Iran. Now, in my view, that is a form of expression. He's also what you call a fanatical Zionist. I saw an earlier interview with Hegseth in which he talked about the possibility of rebuilding the Jewish temple instead of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. So this is the quality and the moral level of the people that we're dealing with. So whatever distortion you may get from the media, this is what the man in charge of the actual operation is saying. Now that can only be explained by reference to a dying system. Trump is the figurehead, because in my view he's not really in charge. He's the figurehead of the most powerful state of the historical capitalist system, which is falling apart, which has become financialized into a speculation machine. And one of its last assets is the incredible military power that the United States possesses, not to produce anything positive, but to destroy. And they're destroying now the last state on a list that was drawn up in the late 70s, when the first conference on the war on terror was held in Jerusalem, followed by subsequent conferences with people like Netanyahu, Menachem Begin, and others all participating. And there was one major state still left on that list that was drawn up at that time, after the destruction of Iraq, the destruction of Syria, breakup of Sudan, breakup of Somalia, you name it. And that was Iran. And Iran is now being attacked. And I think, and its people, Tehran has a larger population than New York and a greater population density. If you start carpet bombing a city of this size and this density of population, you get massacres of unheard of proportions. And that's what's going on now. There's no point in saying that we don't like the mullahs. And, Oliver was right in pointing out that if we would have left Iran in peace in 1953, we would be living in a different world now. All these subsequent changes have been the result of the reverberations of what was done in 1953. By the way, at that time, the United States also took over a large part of Anglo-Iranians' control of Iranian oil. So the British control of Iranian oil was reduced in the process because, of course, imperialist states don't do this for nothing. The economy is a large field, but I would say what you have to keep in mind is we're looking at a dying system. It may take 15 years, it may take 50 years, but it is dying. It will be replaced by a more collective setup. And what is happening now is the chaos phase of that systemic change. I mean, these are big words perhaps, but it's important to see it in those terms.
Yep, I totally agree. It is a worry, and Fred, you must also agree that that the reporting, even from legacy media, and I have to say, some I've been surprised with. They have been quite accurate, and they tell it as that particular instant is. But there is still the speculative reporting, and I always go back to the information operation. The reason why I know a fair bit about this is because someone that worked for us a couple of years ago was going to be very senior, I won't tell you how senior, with the information operation Ukraine v Russia. So the information that's being released, and we understand there, that Donald Trump wants to rid the world of these terrible people. The fear is and again, reporting from the media, and you could fill us in, was 4 weeks a pipe dream? Was it wishful thinking? Secondly, the munitions supply, such as has been reported that, and I find that absolutely astonishing. If it's, and I don't believe it's true, but just that reporting that the US may run out of munitions, and I think, what the hell? You have on the ground 15 million royal guards with Iran, and they're all quite fanatical. They would rather shoot you than negotiate. And you have the unknown. We have, and sure, there's a number of airstrikes that are doing enormous damage, and it's reciprocated too, and disrupting, again, the world economy. So what is, in your mind, as a person that's been on the ground, understanding how the whole system works, the reporting, and by the way, the munitions reporting has been from legacy media, which I find is just incredible, that they're saying that the US is going to run out of particular munitions. It's like, get out of it. So what's your take on this? What would the situation be, the real situation? Because you would know, you would be reading stuff at the moment and wanting to do a few hikes up Diamond Head, 3 or 4 in a row, because it must be driving you nuts. What's in your opinion, what is the real situation with the munitions, with the airstrikes? Because let's face it, airstrikes don't win wars. It's boots on the ground. Sure, they've got the Kurds now creating a few headaches, but how well has that gone in previous skirmishes? What's your views?
There's a lot in there. Well, we'll start first with the types of munitions, and if you just look at what Lockheed Martin, the largest defense contractor in the world, stock over the last 30 days only went up 10%. 30 days, we've seen the ratcheting it up of all this tension, and we knew, and I've been out there saying, hey, America will likely, the probability is almost 100%, is what I was saying, and it went out on a big limb, and it happened. But not just the people at Lockheed Martin that are in the C-suite and own the stock options, but I'm talking about the bankers, and not just at Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, but banks in London and in Sydney and all over the world. The stock would have been up way more than 10%. But the few bad men that I mentioned, General James Dunford, former Commandant of the Marine Corps, one of the last commanders of the International Security Forces in Afghanistan, and former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's a board member of Lockheed Martin. General Mattis, another bad man. He's mentioned, and he threw the book at us, sent 45 criminal investigators. He's on the board of General Dynamics. The last chairman, or last Secretary of Defense, previously worked at Raytheon, and in between when he retired as a 4-star general in charge of all the Middle East. So my point is all these companies, they have lobbyists on K Street that all they do in Raytheon, General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, and you name whatever company you want, they don't hire these 4-star generals because they have PhDs in aerospace engineering, or, these guys all have the same occupation that I started with. They were infantry officers, knuckle draggers. They're people like me that just learned to walk upright, barely have evolved, but they didn't also hire them for the No General Left Behind program because they wanted to keep them off the streets, because they're only getting $203,000 a year on their pensions for a 4-star general. That's not why. They have put them in these positions because of their access and placement. They can go into the Pentagon, these people who have been working for them and that they had been promoting. They're going to use the same carrot and stick they did while they were on active duty and say, Mike, you know, these mind resistant armored personnel carriers in this company, Oshkosh, we need somebody like you. So you're about ready to finish up there at World Today, and they want to see if you're going to play ball. So the moral of the story in saying all this is one thing that America does better than anything is these two other panel members had mentioned is they produce high-tech weapons of mass, not just weapons of mass destruction, but high-tech weapons, also precision-guided munitions. And we're not at a shortage of those. We have been holding those off. We haven't sold any Tomahawks to Ukraine, but what we did deplete a lot of is these shoulder-fire rockets and a lot of the other individual and crew-served ground weapons that we have offloaded to Ukraine. And I'm not a big fan of depleting. At one point, we gave 2/3 of our shoulder-fire rockets to Ukraine, and that's a big issue. But I won't say where I get all my information, but it's from some very reliable sources, multiple sources, and we're at no shortage of any type of ammunition. I was a special operator, but what enabled me to continue to stay in the operating forces was having friends uh, who were logisticians, who knew the beans, bullets, and bandages, and they knew the amounts. And we are not at any type of shortage. We planned for this, and we planned for much larger types. And I'm not some propagandist. I'm retired. I am 100% retired, so no, I'm on no one's payroll. Uh, I and trust me, unlike anybody else on this show, I was the few bad men were from the right and the left, so I'm partisan to no one. I have to make decisions based on factual information that I have. But America is one thing that's being talked about is the boogeyman. Oh no, we're running out of ammunition. Uh, Seriously, if any of the panel members think that myself personally or any other person in America that was in the military or military planners or people on active duty think that there's a shortage of ammunition by Americans, or you know, come here and have a Mai Tai with me, or maybe I'll cut you off because somebody's probably not completely sober. But we do not have a problem of high-tech precision guided munitions shortages in our Department of War at this time at all. One thing that's now one thing I had to learn and had to grow up and learn the big boy rules is people put out themes and narratives and they amplify that to serve certain purposes. And of course, that's not a factual information at all, but it serves some people like, oh my goodness, you know, 20% of the world's oil is going through there, and now we won't be able to figure out how to get by with 80% of the world's oil out there. Yes, we will. We have American warships and American attack aircraft. That's aircraft that drop weapons on surface ships and surface forces on the ground, attriting the Iranian Navy as we speak. And once all those Kilo class submarines have been came to surface and destroyed, well, the straits will be opened and there will be continued to be patrolled. And I believe that will not just be by the U.S. Navy. That will be a coalition of Gulf states and other coalition forces besides the United States, because it is very important to the interests of those Gulf states and to the world to ensure that crude oil flows from many of its distributors, but especially in the Gulf region. But no, there is no shortage of precision guided munitions in the United States Navy, in the United States Air Force. I just left a United States Navy base today, and I spent the majority of the day on an Air Force base today. But I am retired, and I will say there is no shortage. There's no alarm by anyone at all that I talk to, and the people that I served with have moved on, and they're wearing stars on their collars, and it's. But that information is completely inaccurate. So I'd just like to put that to rest. And I would agree that oil is very important, and there's probably a deeper reason that Venezuela and Iran, uh, the situations that they're now in, that causes people in Beijing to have to recalculate and recalibrate their gauges as far as if they want to prolong any type of to put the thought in their head if they should be trying to aggress anywhere in the world.
Can I ask you, Oliver?
Yeah.
The and by the way, Fred, great information because we have been receiving and from mainstream media or legacy media some truly hysterical reporting. The what's your thoughts about Russia and China being involved? I would have thought by now, if they were going to become involved in a greater way, they may be providing Iran with weapons. We don't know how they're getting in, but we're talking about two superpowers. Do you think Russia and China will become more involved? I don't think so. I think at the moment they're sitting this out because it's better because China plays the long game anyway. Russia, sure, it's one of their allies and they do a lot of trade, but they're sort of sitting it out at the moment. Just as part B to that, your views on Keir Starmer. I mean, he seems to be. Does anyone like him?
Well, let's deal with the first question, which I think is the more important at the moment. I think the Russians and the Chinese have both provided aid to Iran. I think that's incontestable. There are strategic partnerships between both China and Iran, and also between Russia and Iran. And there's also, just last January, there was a trilateral partnership agreed. And we know that there has been some provision, for example, of air defenses from both Russia and China to Iran, and anti-ship missiles and that kind of thing. The relationships in general are reasonably harmonious. That is to say, outside of a war situation. The three countries are members of the BRICS, and having said that, however, I think the evidence of this aid from Russia and China to Iran being particularly effective is, let us say, thin. And this is now beginning to conform to a broad pattern that's emerging also with respect to the Russian and Chinese response to Venezuela, which was supposedly a good friend of both Russia and China, and now, as we see in the case of Cuba. To put it bluntly, my assessment is that Russia and China are simply invisible. Their impact is nada, it's zilch. And there may be very good geopolitical reasons to justify this. I think the danger for both Russia and China is that they will be seen, and perhaps they actually are, paper tigers. There is a point at which they need, if they are to convince the global majority, or as sometimes we call it, the global South, or vice versa, there's a time when when leaders need to stand up and show their damn cards. Russia has some very impressive cards, I have no doubt about it, in hypersonic weaponry, the aggression, and various other innovations, both in nuclear and non-nuclear weaponry. But it's not used. It's not used because the logic of mutual destruction still prevails. They can't overcome the logic of mutual assured destruction. MAD is the acronym. Well, if that's the case, why are they still building these things, and why are they still presuming that the rest of the world will quake in fear once they make mention of these weapons, which they know they cannot use, unless, of course, some totally mad clique achieves power in either time. I'm not expecting that. I mean, frankly, we've seen a mad clique take over Washington. That's where the mad clique is, and it's Washington where I most expect some act of madness with respect to the use of nuclear weapons. But in Iran, I don't think that necessity or thought is going to occur to anybody. It doesn't. It won't need to occur to anybody.
Professor Vanderbilt, could you just tell me your thoughts that Russia has flagged cutting off Europe's energy supplies? What happens then?
Yeah. Yes, and today there was the sinking of a Russian liquefied gas tanker in the Mediterranean. So what frightens me most is the coming together of all these different aspects. Of course, the bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline, the prevention of the South Stream pipeline, which was part of the coup that was engineered in Kiev in 2014. All these acts are acts of war, and the frightening prospect now is that all these things begin to come together. By the way, I also agree completely with what Oliver just said about the disappointing behavior of Russia and China. And by disappointing, I don't mean to say that they start fighting or so, but merely to make a moral statement that there are limits to international behavior that we better observe for the interests of all of us. And nothing like that has been forthcoming. If you compare that to the position of Spain, which is in a vulnerable position because it exports 50 billion per year to the United States, and that has now been stopped, or at least such things, of course, take some time. Simply because the Prime Minister of Spain has said that this is a war that he can't support. It's a break of all rules that from the beginning of the 20th century have been introduced to try and mitigate the consequences of death and destruction, which is inherent in war. And now that's being visited on Iran for no reason whatsoever, except that the last statement of President Trump's spokesperson was that he had a feeling Iran was about to attack the United States. Now, if that's a level at which decisions of effectively genocide, because that's what it will end in, are being taken, then we are in a very bad situation. So Russian oil is there and it's ready for Europe. Meanwhile, we have here an absurd anti-Russian campaign. Putin, who is, as was just indicated, who is over cautious and doesn't want to disrupt the civilian type of life that he presides over. He is very modest on every front, and yet he is being demonized in Europe as Hitler incarnate. So we are in a world that is fracturing, and that is because the underlying economic system that sustained it is breaking apart. That also leads to positive things like the attitude of the Spanish Prime Minister, which is, of course, in the end, just symbolic. So the fact that this system basically is disintegrating leads to the violent nature of international politics. and the turn into or the descent into a terminal form of violence. Because I fear that the society that was Iran, which has gone through these different mutations that we already had, political mutations that we already mentioned, that the society of Iran will end just as Syrian society, which was a very interesting complex of different types of forms of life. Iraqi society, these have all been destroyed, irreparably destroyed. It will take generations before these countries find themselves again into something functioning. And that is because that's my feeling, that the underlying economic system is collapsing. And that takes very unexpected forms, and well, they're best described in chaos theory. That we are now in a stage where the system collapses, is being replaced by another system, and in mathematics you can describe that as a chaos phase in which extreme aberrations take place.
Fred, would you like to add your thoughts there?
I would definitely agree with that comment, and I think for a long time, it's a lot of effort has been put in, a lot of coordination to off the U.S. dollar, and there's a lot of people around the globe that want that they believe that's the future, and but time will tell. I don't see and believe that is imminent. That's some people's desire to come off of the dollar into some other form of currency, or as we're seeing with the consolidation with BRICS. But I believe there will be people that have to choose sides in this. But I will say that again, what I commented since I was a young recruit back on the subject with Iran is some people think that this was unprovoked. And I would ask those same people, what did the United States do on 7 October 2021 that deserved uh, these militias that are Iranian backed, the Houthis, firing at our Navy ships, that it took 6 months? We heard today that there was 6 American service members who've been killed in action. But why did it take 6 months for the Marine Corps, or excuse me, the Military Times media to submit a Freedom of Information Act request to find out how many attacks there had been and how many deaths there had been from Iranian-backed militias inside the Middle East? And I'm talking Hamas, Hezbollah, inside Iraq and Syria, where we still have significant amount of American forces, to include ground forces, to include many of the Marine special operators that I served with that were getting hit, that I know hit and some wounded by these Iranians who were, even when I was fighting in Iraq, these Quds forces were coming across and training many of the Mujahideen to use mortars, to use rockets, to use different improvised explosive devices that killed and wounded many Americans. That was not some organic Iraqi forces. In some cases it was, but there was a lot of Iranian influence in Iraq as well as in Afghanistan. But I go back to 7 October, America, what were we doing hostile towards Iran? I don't know, and I'm not ignorant. But I will say that there was 168 attacks the 6 months right afterwards. And our own Pentagon wasn't releasing that unless they were forced to through the Freedom of Information Act, because only one military source wanted to know about it. It was like a secret that we had to hide. There was no reason for that. We used to have that reporting on a website called iCasualty.org, and it had both theaters, how many were wounded and how many were killed in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then later Syria. But my point is, all the Navy warships that were being fired upon by missiles, that a lot of these were Chinese technology that were given to the Iranians, and utilized by the Houthis that were financially supported and supported through training by Iran. So for somebody to say that this is completely unprovoked, again, I just gave you a very narrow window of 6 months, and the friends that I served with were fighting in defensive positions. They were not allowed to fight back, and they could launch some drones and go into bunkers, but many Americans were killed. And the same thing goes since 1979 when uh, people were held hostage. And then when we go to 1983, when Hezbollah attacked and killed 17 Americans in the American embassy in Beirut, Lebanon. And when you add then with the Marine barracks killing, there was total 258 between those two attacks in just 1 year. It goes on and how many people were kidnapped, killed, to include 7 October, to include threats against the President of the United States. So when you say this is completely unprovoked, if you can stop for a minute and try to visualize, what if this was happening to you? What if you actually had some skin in the game? What if you knew people who were being wounded and killed, and none of this was, you know, allowed to be openly disseminated, but you knew and you felt this? I think you'd probably feel a little bit different. It's different when you're on the other side of the world and you don't have the information and you're not feeling any of these effects, to have these opinions that this was completely unprovoked.
Mm.
But again, 2021, we had just pulled out of Afghanistan. Why were any forces? I say why, because we pulled out in such an embarrassing way that we're being ridiculed. People
Mm.
still in Iran were still shouting "Death to America." We don't shout that in America. We don't say "Death to Iran." So again, some people may take this new information and adjust and seek. Hey, maybe I should be what I say, be more tolerant, be open minded, seek out this information from sources that maybe I don't always talk to.
Mm.
Find another Fred Galvin that has been there on the ground. They're in England. There's many British Marines and British Special Forces that have been on the ground and they know and they can be trusted. If you can't trust them, then there's probably a greater problem. But my opinion is three sides to every story, and you need to evaluate every single side. And I'm not picking, hey, the right or the left. One thing that Malcolm X did say that I do believe was correct is uh, it's tied to the same bird, and the whole bird's corrupt and dirty. If you think you're going to be a politician and you got to raise millions and millions of dollars and not pay somebody back for something dirty that they're asking, you're crazy. And if you trust politicians, um, that's even more of a concern. But yes,
Yeah.
sometimes we have to, and sometimes that's how things are getting done. But I do believe there's a lot of intentional disinformation that is placed out there, and people are thinking that this is completely unprovoked. When you've threatened to kill people and you've taken people hostage, and you've done it for, I mean, name the catalyst, name the reason that Iran was trying to uh, do all these attacks by launching. I mean, they've put so much in investments into drones and missiles, and um, they haven't invested in their uh, aviation assets, and they've not put very little comparatively from the 100 billion that China has given them over the years into their navy, and that's we're seeing what's happened with it now. People are like, I can't believe what's happened so fast. Well, when you invest everything into a few areas like missiles and drones, that's where we're at right now,
Mm.
and that's what we'll see how long this lasts. I know you mentioned, Mike, they have 15 million. It's actually 600, just over 600,000 active forces, and a little over 350,000 reserve forces. And that takes a long time to attrit. But they are the 16th largest military in the world. But it's
Mm.
not going to happen overnight.
Mm.
Time will tell. Nobody is the soothsayer here that's going to be spot on. Uh,
Mm.
maybe somebody that's picking stocks in the U.S. Congress could take a wild guess and be right, but definitely not me.
Isn't that interesting? The 15 million was a number that has been bandied around. So already that's been put to rest. But it's and we'll get to Oliver in one sec. It's interesting that the information operation works from both sides, and what gets out. I mean, you're saying that a lot of the conflict we're not seeing, we're not being told about, yet the other side or others are releasing, not the other side, others are releasing sometimes information which would be looked as contrary to what is happening. But if they don't release the information in the first place, then that's all you have. So you often wonder, is a casualty of war, besides the human life, is it the truth?
Yes.
And I think it is. We are going to run out of time, so I'm going to just have to ask if we could. I want to ask you all, where do we go from here, and how do you see the landscape? And if possible, if we could do that in a couple of minutes, that would be much appreciated. Oliver.
Well, I'm going to go back to Keith's point, really, about the geopolitical context of all of this. What I believe we are seeing, particularly since China's accession to the WTO in 2001, it's become more and more apparent that the unipolar world, or the unipolar moment for the United States, is now well and truly over. It hasn't vanished, but that what had been a brief period of uncontested US hegemony has come to an end, primarily as a result of the return of Russia to a position of significant strength in international affairs, but mainly and above all, of course, because of the rapid growth of the Chinese economy, and also the appearance some 10 years or so ago of the BRICS coalition. The United States, I believe, has taken the view that it wishes to sustain that unipolar moment, or at least to return to it. It wishes to sustain US hegemony. And I also believe that it has taken the strategic decision that it must act now rather than later, because not only does Russia have at least a comparable nuclear strength, but also China is rapidly growing in nuclear facilities, and also in many other spheres of armed forces. The United States is demonstrating great power, but also great desperation at the moment. It is taking the kind of risks that desperate people take. I assume, or I don't have to assume, we know that one of the factors, of course, is the staggering United States debt of approximately $39 trillion, which is not being addressed by the zany Trump terror tariffs, as I like to call them. And nor is the United States showing any evidence yet of substance that it is reindustrializing, which was another explanation that we were given for these tariffs. But tariffs to one side, the story is the United States sees its future as being dependent on striking now, on taking the low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit are countries that have tried to resist what I call authoritarian liberalism, namely Venezuela and Cuba, perhaps Greenland, and of course now we saw Syria, and now we're seeing Iran. But the primary goal, of course, is to get rid of all the small players, and then go for the big ones. Maybe China first and then Russia, or Russia first and then China, maybe Russia and China together. Who knows? But it has to be done now. because these opposing strengths are, as it happens, they do constitute an existential threat, not to the United States, but to the United States hegemony and those forces within the United States that really, really need this hegemony.
Professor Vanderpil, could you just tell me what you think in a couple of minutes, if you wouldn't mind, because we have run out of time, and I'm being waved at furiously by our producer in the background. If you could just tell us where you think this will head and what we can expect.
Well, I'll be very brief. Just 2 points, because after all that's been said, the BRICS is not a block in my mind, and the illustration for that is that Modi of India, who is a close friend of Netanyahu, actually went to Israel on the eve of Israel's attack to confer, we must assume, about the impending military operations. Now, the other thing is that Israel is, reputed by many to have damaging material on Trump and on the entire American Congress and so on. And I think there's no doubt about that, that it's very serious. But there's another aspect of Israeli blackmailing of the United States, which has, by the way, been treated in a fantastic 2-volume book by Whitney Webb, One Nation Under Blackmail. And that is the so-called Samsung option. Israel, after it got its illegal nuclear arsenal in the late 50s, actually used that arsenal to blackmail the United States much more than attacking anyone, because for that its arsenal is too small. And the Samsung option means that if things don't go Israel's way, they will threaten to activate their nuclear arsenal. But ultimately, and that's the Samsung option, they will blow up the world, including their so-called allies. And that has to do with a deep-rooted sense of uniqueness, being the chosen people, and so on and so forth. These are the 2 points that I'd like to make.
And Fred, as I would imagine this is from a military point of view. And where do you see the land lies? Where do you see the future? How do you think it'll pan out?
Yes, as has been discussed, I do believe America does have a lot of enemies around the world. They've made that very clear to us. And some people can think that Donald Trump is some warmonger. He promised there would be no wars, and I don't think he's going to have boots on the ground. I think he's going to take that very carefully, unless it's some kind of requirement. But he's trying to hedge off these wars, trying to protect the United States. I know after withdrawing from Afghanistan, you had all these companies that I've mentioned already that are seeking, and letting it be known that the tail wags the dog. The president can say we're leaving Afghanistan, but these companies are going to continue to produce massive amounts of weapons to increase the return on investments. And it's scary that I agree with Oliver that our debt is staggering, and that is something that is a true vulnerability in the United States. But what also is vulnerability is to allow the amount of massive buildup of Russian air defense systems and weapons that were going into Venezuela. It's a little bit further away than what President Kennedy saw in Cuba in the 1962. But when you put the threat of hypersonic missiles and you start really building up a big harbor and position in Venezuela, that was a problem. There was a lot of Chinese investment into a lot of military hardware in Iran, and I believe that there's an intelligence that I certainly don't have. It's all speculation, and I'll be the first one of possibly anybody that's open to admit that I don't know all this, but I don't think anybody else does either. So when we speculate, we're just talking conjecture and we're giving our opinions. But it's that government there killing their own people. It's something that it's hard to imagine in the 21st century. But I'm not saying that the United States is morally superior at all. But what was going on for people who were protesting? We have people protesting and have all kinds of different views in the United States, but we're not having mass murder. So that's I'll leave it there. I know your producer's pushing for time, but thank you very much for this opportunity again, Michael.
Yeah, I think it's I was going to say, if only they could be more transparent. We understand, though, that sometimes you can't be, but the information operation rolls on from both sides. Things are distorted, and I suppose some of us would just love to know exactly, instead of having a three-sided coin, just have one side, the truth, because we do need to know. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have these discussions, and many say the Trump derangement syndrome is in full swing. Having said that, I look at the people that are advising Donald Trump, from Hegseth to Kash Patel and now gone Dan Bongino, and I often wonder, why would he want to have news anchors or celebrity squares as his advisors? That's just my humble opinion. Oliver, if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
I have a Substack column that I write several times a week. It's called Empire and Communication.
And Professor, if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Well, I have an academia.edu website, which has most of my work. And there will be a new book very soon, which is called Israel and 9/11, 25 years of war on terror. Mm-hmm. And I'm very proud of that book. It will be free for anyone to read, and only in Holland it will come out in a hard copy at first. Mm-hmm. But please take note, because it contains material you won't have dreamt existed.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And Fred, somebody wants to find out more about you besides at the Royal Hawaiian in the bar there, how else would they do that?
They could find me on Waikiki Beach or at www.commandoshow.com.
Absolutely fantastic. And thank you very much to all of you for staying back a bit. But I think, we could have gone for another hour, 2 hours, because we really have just touched on it. And I think we need more of these too. So expect a call from Jen at a good time too, not at a late hour. Thank you very much for joining us. This has been The Protagonist. Coming up next, The World Today. Thank you again to our guest.